Hello, my book presentation is going about the book Kiss Kiss. Kiss Kiss is a collection of 11 different and short stories by Roald Dahl. The book is published in 1960. Now I will tell you my program of this presentation. I will first tell you something about the writer of the book. I will follow with discussing 2 of the 11 different stories. After I discuss the 2 stories within the character analysis and the themes and motives, I will tell you in which way the 11 different stories compare with each other. Finally, I will give my opinion about the book. Roald Dahl is the writer of the book. Roald Dahl is born in 1916 in Wales. He died in 1990 at the age of 74. Roald Dahl was a famous writer. He wrote books for children and adults. The books for children were most of the times very funny, weird and unpredictable. The books for adults were most of the times very bizarre with a surprising end. Typical for the books of Roald Dahl is that there is good and evil, and it would always go wrong with the evil people. Roald Dahl had more success with his books for children. 2 famous books of him for children are Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Matilda. He had won a lot of prizes with these books. His success with the books for adults was less than the books for children. But nevertheless, he can be seen as one of the best and famous writer of children's books. The first story I'm going to discuss is the story The Way Up to Heaven. I'll first give you a summary of this story. A rich lady named Mrs. Foster is going to her daughter and grandchildren in Paris. The next morning she's going to the airport. Mrs. Foster has a fare to be late for a train, a taxi or something like that. The next morning she's again afraid to be late, but due to the weather the flight is cancelled to the next morning. Next morning she's again going by taxi to the airport, but this time her man is coming with her. When they are already in the taxi, her man pretends to have forgotten a present that she has to bring with her. So her man runs to the house to pick up the present. Mrs. Foster notices that the present lays in the car, so she ran to the house to say that the present lays in the car. But she's not going inside the house, she's only listening at the door. She ran back very fast and says to the taxi driver that they have to go. Luckily, she's on time at the airport for the flight. When she is in Paris, she sends letters to her husband in New York City. When she comes back in New York City, at her house, she notices that there's nobody home, and all the letters were still laying on the doormat. In the hall, she smells a naughty odor. She smells it at the elevator, so she calls a repairman to repair the elevator. And she's waiting for her husband. But what is now the clue of this story? The clue of this story is that the man is laying in the elevator. Mrs. Foster did this on purpose, because when she ran to the house to say that the present lay in the car, she only heard at the door and not went inside. She heard him screaming for help because he was stuck in the elevator, but she did not help him because she hated him, because he irritated her whole life. And that's just the clue of the story. In this story there are 2 main characters, Mrs. and Mr. Foster. Mrs. Foster is a very restless person. She has a fear of missing a plane, a train or something like that. She is always hurrying to be on time for that kind of things. Mr. Foster is just the opposite of her. He is very calm and he is enjoying his life with the money he had made with his business career. Another quality of Mr. Foster is that he wants to irritate his wife. But this quality would be fatal at the end of the story, because he died. Mr. Foster changes in the end of the story into a calm person, because she murdered her man. She could not stand him anymore, and that's why she is sort of happy that he is gone. The theme of the story is anxiety. Mrs. Foster has a fear of missing a plane, etc. You can also see this as a motive, because it comes back a couple of times. So, the theme of the first part of the story is anxiety, because it all turns around the fear of Mrs. Foster. In the second part of the story, the theme is intentional murder or revenge, because Mr. Foster murdered Mr. Foster on purpose, and that's why you can see it as a revenge. In the rest of the story there are no motives, because the story was too short, so there didn't came a lot of things back in the story. The second story that I'm going to discuss is called Genesis and Catastrophe. The story is based on a true story, but you will see that later on. I will first give you a short summary. A Germanic woman, Clara, has had a tough life. Her 3 children died at a young age. At the moment, she is giving birth to another kid. She is very concerned about the health of the kid, but luckily this time the kid is healthy. Clara is very happy with the kid and that's why she's very happy. But the clue of this story is that the name of the kid is Adolf Hitler, who later became a very horrifying man. In this story there are 2 main characters, Clara and her man. Clara is a very concerned woman. She is very concerned about the health of the kid. Her man is a bit crazy. He's very pessimistic. He thinks that the kid is too weak and will die again at a young age. He's also always drinking beer, even on the funeral of one of his kids who died at a young age. It's a bit difficult to say how a person is, because the story was very short. So, yeah, it's a bit difficult. This time, the theme of the story is also anxiety, because Clara is very concerned about the health of the kid. You can also say that murder is the theme of the story, because this is the source of the Second World War, but it does not appear in the narrative, so you can doubt about it. A motive in this story is that the father of Adolf is drunk every time, a couple of times, on the funeral of the one of its kids, and on the moment that Clara is giving birth to Adolf. But again, the story is very short, so there are no clear motives. The question now is, what do the 11 different stories have in common with each other? The 11 different stories have in common that they are very bizarre and unrealistic. In one story, there is a man with a physical obsession for women. When he got kissed by a woman, he got swallowed by the woman, and he continues his life in the intestine of the woman. It's very unrealistic. a couple of stories also give a moral lesson. One story, for example, has the moral lesson that you must not swindle people, because you always get caught with that. The stories don't have one same theme with each other. They don't have one general theme. So they are not in common on that side of the story. But they are only in common with each other about the fact that they are very bizarre, the stories, and unrealistic. Now my opinion about the book. I didn't like the book very much, because it were all different stories. I did like a couple of stories, for example the two stories that I've discussed. The good points of these stories were that the stories were very funny, but also very hard. Also, the surprising end was very nice. What I did not like about the book is that they were too short. So that means when you don't understand a couple of sentences, it means that you can miss the whole clue. And that's why I struggled with some stories. Another disadvantage of this book is that it becomes sometimes too unrealistic. I don't like unrealistic books. I like more books that are based on experience, or just realistic books. But after all, I can say that some stories of the book were nice, with a good moral lesson. But I would not recommend this book to people, unless you like unrealistic books. This was my presentation.